This story happened to me back when I was in high school. I had a best friend who we will call Taylor. Taylor and I had been best friends since freshman year, and at the time of this story we were in our junior year. We used to both be nerdy in freshman, and in sophomore year we sometimes got picked on. Once junior year rolled around, I decided to change my look and join more social activities. I started making friends and even got noticed by some of the cool guys in the school. I noticed that the more popular I became, the more distant Taylor and I grew. She started to say things like, "Oh, you think you're all that now?" This made me feel really sad because I didn't think I was treating her any different, and I still considered her my best friend. When I would get invited to parties and she wouldn't get invited, I could tell it made her really upset. All of our junior year was spent being distant. We usually walked home from school every day, and junior year was only once a week because her mom started picking her up on the other days. We always talked about going to the same university after high school and had planned to apply to all of the same schools. That year, Taylor had planned to apply to completely different schools and hadn't even told me. I found out from our mutual friend, who we will call Casey. The end of junior year approached, and it was time for junior prom. I had been asked to the prom by one of the popular football players. Taylor hadn't been asked to prom by anyone, and I could tell she was jealous. I told her she can always join me and my date because I had already asked, and he didn't mind. She turned down my offer and said she would be skipping prom. But she offered to do my hair and makeup and said I could get dressed at her house. I thought she was acting strange, but thought that maybe she had come to her senses and wanted to be a supportive friend. The day of the junior prom comes around, and my parents drop me off at Taylor's house. She greeted me at the door and we walked to her room. Her family wasn't home. She said they had gone away for the weekend. Taylor did my hair and started on my makeup. A few minutes into my makeup, our other friend Casey shows up. The mood in the room quickly changed, and I noticed that they were both acting strange. They looked at each other before both jumping me and attempting to tie me to the chair I was sitting on. Taylor had a knife in her hand and said she was going to hurt me. She was waving the knife at me, and when I asked her why she was doing this, she just told me to shut up. Casey started ripping my dress with scissors and pouring bleach all over it. I began crying hysterically, and that's when Taylor snatched the scissors from Casey and began cutting my hair. I put my hand up to stop her from cutting my hair, and I felt a hard stab on my hand. She had stabbed me with the scissors. I started bleeding, and Casey pleaded with Taylor, telling her that was enough. Casey was yelling, "You've taken it too far. You promised me you wouldn't hurt her." Armed with the scissors and the knife, Taylor began threatening Casey. Casey stormed out of the room, leaving me to face Taylor all by myself. About 3 minutes later, the police showed up. They managed to get the knife and scissors from Taylor, but not before she tried to harm herself by cutting her own neck. That night I missed the prom, but worst of all, I lost my best friend. I never spoke to Taylor again after that night. Stay spooked.
In college, I worked as a bartender at the same bar with my best friend, who we will call Tammy. There was a customer who came in every night. He really seemed to like Tammy, and she was really into him too. At first, he seemed really nice until I found out that he had a criminal record. Tammy was really into bad boys, so this didn't bother her at all. As they became more serious, Tammy and I would spend less time together. The times that we did spend together, he was always calling her or would show up to where we were. A few months into Tammy and Jay's relationship, my grandmother passed away. When my grandmother passed away, I inherited her house and some money. I moved into my grandmother's house a few weeks after she passed away, and since Tammy and I were already sharing an apartment, she moved in with me. My new house had already been paid off before my grandmother passed away, but I still had to pay utilities. I asked Tammy to pay rent to cover a portion of the utilities, and she agreed. The first month went well, and she paid me on time. During the second month, I noticed that Jay would sleep over more often. Tammy also hadn't paid her rent, which I must say was very little. I told Tammy that Jay wouldn't be able to sleep over anymore, and she got very upset. She started screaming at me and accusing me of being jealous of her relationship. She told me that she would do whatever she wanted, and I couldn't stop her. Jay continued sleeping over, and Tammy stopped talking to me. I finally told her that she had to move out, and she told me that she and Jay both had rights to be in my house because they were considered legal residents. Soon Tammy stopped bartending and would stay home all day in my house with Jay smoking pot. At night, they would have parties with a lot of guests. My uncle, who was a lawyer, had filed the eviction paperwork to get Tammy and Jay to leave. Once they were served with the notice, they got even more angry. My uncle had also done a background check on Jay and found out that his criminal record consisted of many violent charges and armed robbery. My uncle told me it would be best if I moved out of the home temporarily and came to stay with him and his family until things calmed down. I decided to take my uncle up on his offer. I went back to the house one day to pack all my valuables to go and saute with my uncle. That day Jay came home, and he looked like he was high on something more than just pot. He started yelling at me and calling me names, and then Tammy joined in. Jay pulled out a weapon and started telling me to give him all my money. He said, "I know you have money from your grandmother." I looked at Tammy, who was smiling. I told him I didn't have any money, and he walked me into the bedroom where I had a safe in a secret compartment. The only person I told about the safe was Tammy. She obviously had told him where my money was. He pointed the weapon at me and demanded that I open the safe. I opened the safe, and he took all the money that was in it. I won't say exactly how much money, but it was in the 5-figure range. After taking the money, they left, and I called the police. The police came and took a statement from me. Tammy and Jay were found about 2 weeks after being on the run, and they were both arrested. Tammy and Jay were found at a bank after the bank manager called the police to notify them of a possible fraud. Tammy had gone into the bank attempting to withdraw money from my bank account while pretending to be me. I couldn't believe my best friend had set me up to be an armed robbery victim and then tried to steal money from my bank account. Thank you for listening to my story. Be careful of jealous friends. Stay spooked.
Back in 2019, right before the pandemic, my best friend, who we will call Noel, started dating my brother. I love my brother, but I have to admit he can be a bit of a playboy. I had warned Noel of my brother's womanizing ways, but she decided to date him anyway. They had only been dating for a month when I noticed that my brother had been seeing other girls. I confronted him and asked him to break it off with Noel if he wasn't going to be faithful. I didn't tell Noel what my brother had been doing because I didn't want to be in the middle, and also, I was loyal to him. I have to admit, the entire situation made me very uncomfortable. One day, my brother came home with a new girl I had never seen before. Noel and I had made plans to go shopping together. I told Noel to call me when she was outside of my house, which she did. I ran outside once she arrived and got in her car ready to leave. She started asking where my brother was, and I told her I didn't know. She said she had been calling him the entire day, but he had been ignoring her calls. She asked if she could go inside to use the bathroom, and I was so nervous. I had just lied to my best friend about not knowing where my brother, her boyfriend, was. Of course, I couldn't say no to her using the bathroom in our house. We walked into my house, and instead of going to the bathroom, Noelle made her way to the basement where my brother's room was. She saw my brother with the other girl and went crazy. She started throwing stuff around his room and threatening the other girl. I ran downstairs to try to calm the situation down, and she started screaming at me and calling me a bad friend. Noelle ran outside and started smashing the windows to his car with a bat that my dad always kept behind our front door. My brother ran outside and tried to stop her from doing more damage to his car. She swung the bat at him and missed. She was chasing my brother around outside with the bat, and finally she no longer had the energy to continue chasing him around. She got in her car and we all thought she was leaving, then she headed straight for our house. Before I knew it, Noelle had driven her car through our house. The neighbors called 911 and the police, the firefighters, and an ambulance all came. My parents weren't home at the time, but they arrived shortly after the first responders did. My mom was crying, and my father looked very angry. They had worked so hard to build our home, which was destroyed within a couple of seconds. My parents decided not to press charges against Noelle after her parents, who were friends of my parents, pleaded with them not to. We had to relocate to a hotel for about a month while our home was being repaired, and Noelle's father paid for everything. My parents were very angry with my brother, and he was no longer allowed to bring any of his girlfriends home. My friendship with Noelle was never the same again, and neither was the relationship between my parents and hers. Sometimes I miss our friendship, but then I get angry when I think about what she did. My dog always slept in the living room during the day, and I couldn't help but think about how things would have ended if he hadn't gone out with my parents that day. Stay spooked.